Hello, we're going to talk about Native Americans. The first people that came here and took care of the earth. They were nomads, and nomads meant they carried everything that they owned on their backs. They walked and walked and walked and walked, and they followed the buffalo. When the buffalo stopped, they would stop. When the buffalo moved, they would move. They'd carry on their back a big piece of animal skin that they had prepared. They found some sticks, and what they did was they made themselves, I'm sure you know the name of it, a teepee. They did like colors and they did like art, so many of them decorated their teepees. So in there they would go while the buffalo were grazing. And the men would go out and hunt for the buffalo. When they had to move again, they took the sticks out and left them for the animals that lived there to use in their homes. And they wrapped up their animal skin and put it on their back again and went on. Finally, they got to the Bering Strait, and they ended up here in what we call Pennsylvania or Penn's Woods. So, what happened was, the chief, he looked around and he saw tall trees. And he liked that. Then he saw 3 Weahanes, that means waters. That's our 3 rivers downtown. Then he saw many, 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 many animals. The 3 things that they really needed and liked. So he decided that he wanted to make his home here. So he went out and he walked up to a weeping willow. And he said, "Brother tree, may I take some of your branches to build a home for my family?" He had respect for all the trees and plants. So he went out, he found the weeping willow branches he wanted, and he built a frame. Then he went to another tree. It was a birch where the bark was peeling off like this. And he said, "Brother birch, may I take some bark from your tree to make a roof on our house?" So he had gotten his permission then when he prayed that Brother Birch didn't mind him taking his bark. So the frame was there. He put all the bark on it, and what he made was a wet tube. There's several other names for them, but I can't think of it, but I will during the time. But this is a wet tube, so it's placed there. And now everybody had a wonderful house. Wigwam was the other word I couldn't get out. A wigwam or a wet tube. So they all were happy. So we're going to sign everybody is happy. So this is everybody, and this is happy. So everybody was happy because they had their wigwam or their wet tube. I even put some little people inside just to show you a family, a mother and a father and a child. Oh, okay. So, then, it started getting a little bit tough to find their favorite foods. So, the ladies, they said, that we need to find our three sisters. Three sisters. Well, turns out that Native Americans called the trees their brother and plants their sisters. Then the men, they said, you know, I watch the crows, and when they get the seeds in the parts of the plant that we like to eat, sometimes they drop them on the ground, and that's where the plants grow. Perhaps we'll try doing that. We'll be like a bird and put seeds on the ground. Well, there was no store, so everything they had to find in nature. This is a little leather pouch which is made of an animal, and he had inside some seeds. So they didn't have shovels or anything because they were, you know, just moving around, and we didn't have stores, like I said. So they dug the ground a little bit, put the seeds in, and the men thought, you know, let's go fishing and get a fish. They got a fish, and that was their, like, fertilizer. They put it in the hole, they covered it over, and then they waited. It was day and night and day and night. The rains fell and the sun shined, and pretty soon the plants began to grow. Their three favorite plants were beans, corn, and squash. And they called them the three sisters. So now that they had their sisters grow, that was like one of the first gardens. So then, when the plants grow up, they had their favorite foods and vegetables were growing. So let's say everybody was happy. So now they had their wigwam or wet tube, and they had a garden. But it got cold, and the ladies got worried. And the lady said, we need something, some meat. We need to find out a way to get it. So they went down to the river, and they took some of the skin that the men had given them when they were hunting, and they put it in the river and washed it. And then they got a rock, and they began to work on it. This is called like tanning the hide. They were doing that, but it gets boring, so a lot of times the Native Americans had songs, and they would sing the songs in the rhythm. All the people that were working had a rhythm, like hi-yo, 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 way-ya-ya, way-ya-ya, way. Pretty soon, they had the leather to make their moccasins and some of the clothes, or they could take the fur and put it in the bottom of their wet shoes, since they were sitting on the cold ground, and it would be like a carpet or a bed. Now, when they did go hunting, the men would get prepared by rubbing themselves with dirt, and that made them not smell like a human. It smelled like earth, nature. So the animals had really good noses, so they would go out quietly, and they'd sit still. That was called seal hunting, and they would look. There was 3 of them, and one of them saw, what do you think that could be? This is a symbol for deer. This is like a moose. And if it's like this, it's a fox, because that's the fox tail. So they wanted to get a hold of the other guys. They didn't have their cell phones. Of course, there wasn't any. So they made a sound like nature so that they can get the other two brothers that were out hunting too. So one's name was Running Wolf. So he made the sound, "Arrrrrrrr!" So that brother came. Now they needed the other brother. He was Great Owl. And he came over. They were all ready. So they got their bow and arrow. This arrow here, see the end of it? They made that. They would get rocks and break it up and sharpen it, and they would have their arrowhead. So they would tie the arrow on, but they wouldn't use string or glue or tape. They would use the muscles from the animal. They didn't waste anything. The muscles were called sinew, and the sinew was really good even when they made moccasins for tying, because it was a little bit sticky. So once they tied it, it stayed tied, and it was very, very sharp. So they pulled back their bow and they got the deer. The first thing that they said was, "This means thank you." And that means God. So they said, "Thank you, Wankantanka." Thank you, God. Because they always were very respectful and gracious that they got these things from the earth. When they did bring them back, and the ladies had tanned the hide and got that work done, the men would get ready again, and they would dance. They would do the dance of the deer again to say thank you. Sometimes they would put the deer skin on their back or have the deer antlers with them. Now I happen to have an antler here. Antlers are solid. I don't know if I can get it out of the bag here. Here's a nice set of antlers. And antlers, they fall off every season. And I had a nice male deer that visited my yard, and he lost one of his antlers right in the backyard. So a lot of people hunt deer because the meat is very good. So antlers are solid. You could use them for many, many things, and they had not many ideas. They even sometimes would use the face of the deer. When they were dancing the deer dance, they would put it on their head and dance in Thanksgiving again. Now the deers we have around here are white-tailed deers, and they got their name because when they're not upset, their tail looks like that. But as soon as they sense a smell or a sound from a human or something else, up goes the tail and they run. That was like a white flag we still use today, and if other deers would follow through the woods. So if they wanted to get the buffalo has a horn, not an antler. The antlers grow and grow and grow till the end of the season. So, and the horns grow, but they don't fall off. Horns are hollow. See, I can put my hand inside. So they would use the horn also for things. So this is like their store. Mother Nature was their store, and they were very careful how much they took from the store. Buffalo skin was very thick and heavy and very warm. This would make a very nice bed in our wigwam or wet. So antlers are solid, and horns are hollow. They even took from the buffalo its stomach and used it for a bucket to carry water. And they used we have a pancreas inside. They would dry that out and they would use that as baby powder to keep their children dry. Many things you could do with the parts of an animal, and they knew how to do it. So they would eat. They would have their beans, their corn, and their squash. Then they needed a dish. And of course they ate the turtle. They didn't just kill it because they wanted a dish. And this is the inside. And it's good because you can go down and wash it at the river, just like we wash dishes every night. So here's our dish. So they would eat with their fingers, and if they needed water, like the grandmas and grandpas, they always used to go and help them and save seats for them if there was something going on. They could bring them water in the horn, just so they didn't have to go to the river and carry anything back. So it was like a cup. So they had a dish and they had a cup. So you see how many things that they used from nature, but they were very, very careful. And I can go on and on and on about things, and they always tried to be very peaceful. Sometimes it didn't work out, but they had this thing called a peace pipe. And this is made coyote fur and wood and part of a deer antler. And this is supposed to be a eagle's feather, but we're not allowed to have those. That's against the law. So back here there's a small hole, so I can and then they put some tobacco in there, and when they wanted to show that they were going to be peaceful with another tribe, they would just, and out would come some smoke. And they believed that when the smoke went up in the sky, it went up to Wankantanka, their god, and it said, we are going to be peaceful people. So hopefully we will learn from them to be peaceful and not waste anything that's on our earth. And thank you again for taking a trip with me to the Native Americans that live in Pennsylvania.